How to connect an MCL-Designer v4 project to a remote database. Many mobile solutions require a connection to a remote database to retrieve data. To do that, we need to create a profile in our MCL project that will contain the connection string to the remote database and replicate its structure. This tutorial is going to show you how to create a remote database profile with a connection to an SQL database server, write the retrieved data into a data file, and show it in a table. The project we're using for this tutorial already contains a data file named barcodes and a screen with a display header, a button, and an advanced list box to show the data we'll get from the remote database. Before we proceed, make sure your computer has internet access so we can test the connection to the remote database during project development. Let's start by creating the remote database profile. Open the project menu and then choose Properties. You can also just use the F2 shortcut. We've opened the project's properties. Go to the Remote Database tab. Click this plus button to create a new profile. We must have a name for the profile. In this case, we'll keep the suggested name, Database. We're going to connect to an SQL-type database, so we can also keep the suggested surround characters. Now let's define the string that will connect the application to the remote database. Click this button to open the Data Link Properties window. Go to the Provider tab and select the best provider option. Now this is important. Make sure you always have the latest database drivers. Go to the Connection tab. For the purposes of this tutorial, we're going to connect this project to an MCL demo of an SQL server database. So fill in the server name field with spw1.mcl4e.com/SQL Express. Keep the default authentication option checked and enter user_MCL as the username and user_MCL2017 as the password. Check the Allow Saving Password option and click here to test the connection. If everything is set up correctly, you'll get a success message. Close this window and this one as well. Now this message comes up because we said we wanted to save the password and we're being warned that the credentials aren't encrypted. Click Yes to continue. We're back to the profile window and as you can see, it shows the connection string to the remote database we want to access. Use the Test Connection button to check if everything is okay with the project's profile. If all goes well, we get a success message. Click OK to close it. At this point, the connection to the remote database is set up, so we can close this window as well. You'll immediately get a message asking if you want to import the remote database's entire structure or just some of its tables. In this case, we only need one table, so click Select Tables, check the Barcodes table, and click OK to apply. The new profile is now listed in the Database Connections table. Click OK to close. Let's check if the import was successful. Open the Remote Database module. We can see the imported table is already there. Right-click it and select View Data to confirm it contains data. Everything looks all right, so click OK to close. Now we need to manage the incoming data. Open the Programs module. The data from the remote database is meant to be written into a data file, so we'll need a specific process. Since we want this to be executed before the screen is drawn, we'll have to add the process to a routine in. This is a specific routine that runs before the screen is presented to the operator. Right-click the screen in the tree view and select Routine In to create it. The process we're adding is going to execute an SQL statement in the remote database and write the information in a data file. Click this button to access the process list window. Open the Remote Database Process group, select the Export from Remote Database to Local File process, and click OK to apply. Let's define its settings. Database will be our data source. This is the remote database profile you created earlier. Barcodes is the intended table. It's the only one we imported into the database profile, remember? We're also going to use the barcodes data file we already had when we started this tutorial. Barcodes is a lookup type file with two fields named barcode and description. We need to link the fields of the data file to the fields of the barcodes table, so start by selecting the data file's barcode field and then the database table field with the same name. In the second row, correspond the description field of the data file to the description field of the database's barcodes table. And we're done. Click OK to close this window and apply the settings. Now we're going to add a go-to process to the routine in to ensure that once the data export is completed, the workflow proceeds to the screen. Open the branch processes group, drag a go-to and drop it below the export process. Then select End of Routine as its target and click OK to apply. When you define communications between an application and an external source, it is important to have some sort of warning if an error occurs. So we're adding a label and a message box with an error message. Select the line below the go-to process and then click the Set a Label button. Name the label COM Error and click OK. Now we're going to add a message box. Select the empty line below the label, click here, open the Display Controls group and double-click Message Box. Type in Error as the message title, set the type to Error, write Communication Error as the message text, and click OK to close the controls properties. Double-click the Export from Remote Database to Local File process to open its properties. Go to the Advanced tab and in the COM Error field, choose the label you've just created to redirect the workflow in case of communications error. Close this window and the Routine In window as well. Let's simulate our project. Click Simulate to launch MCL Simulator. It uses the embedded MCL-Net service to reach the remote database, but if you intend to load the project onto a device for testing, you'll need to install a separate MCL-Net instance. And just like that, you've created and tested a project with a connection to a remote database. Keep checking our MCL tutorial channel for more tutorials.